Hello, everybody. This is SEOinhouse.com broadcasting live. I'm Megan Heinley, and I'll be your moderator for today. We're here for the live webinar, 20-plus technical SEO audit must-haves, or it's not worth the spend. So your expert speaker, Jessica Bowman, has had multiple people ask, like, what should be included in a technical SEO audit that you purchase? They were all disappointed to compare what they got with what they should have gotten. So today we'll walk through example elements that should be included in your audit, but probably weren't. These are also things that you should look for and ask about when purchasing an audit in the future. But before we get to that, a couple quick housekeeping items. As we go through, feel free to chat in your questions. We will queue them up for Q&A at the end. For those of you new to GoToWebinar, the way to chat in those questions is in the questions box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. So if you need any help, just use that same questions box and we'll do our best to help you out, get any issues sorted. The questions box is live, so you can submit your questions all throughout the broadcast, and like I said before, we'll queue them up for Q&A at the end. All right, we are recording this broadcast today, and we'll be sending you a recording link tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. With all of that taken care of, let me just do a quick formal introduction of our speakers for those of you who don't know Jessica. Jessica Bowman is CEO and founder of SEOinhouse.com and former in-house SEO at Enterprise Rent-A-Car and Yahoo Inc. She's also author of the upcoming book, The New SEO Management Handbook for Enterprise-Level Executives. It's almost finished. Jessica is just working on polishing up a few bits, so keep an eye out for that in November. Jessica has 12-plus years of experience in technical SEO, having worked in development most of her in-house SEO career. So on that note, I'll let Jessica dive in and take it away, Jessica.
All right. So as Megan talked about, basically something came up at the in-house SEO exchange that we did in New York last week, and that's where a room full of in-house SEO managers meet to really collaborate and kind of share what's working, what's not, get input on some of their challenges and that type of thing. And toward the end of the day, somebody just said, can I ask this question? What should you get in a technical audit you purchased? Because I'm not sure we received what we should have. So we started going through quite a few different things that, that were involved in what goes into a technical SEO audit. And so I wanted to walk through those because when I was done, a lot of people in the room said, oh yeah, we didn't get that. And so they were rather disappointed. So with that, I'm going to go through quite a few different things. I do have one question. Valerie wrote in, can she see the screen? She said, are there visuals or is it just the audio? And there are visuals. Can you guys see my screen? Yes. Okay, so we are good to go. All right. So what I find, I wanted to back up and talk about what are some of the more common types of audits. So not just what goes into it, but so you know what to expect. So the first one is what I call like a yada yada audit. It's like, yeah, I know all that stuff. And so that's the kind of audit that I think a lot of companies end up purchasing and not realizing that's what they're getting. The second type of audit I see are a comparison of just a bunch of best practices, and that's really good for somebody who maybe doesn't know much about SEO, kind of new to SEO, if you're a smaller site. But what you need when you're a bigger site is something a little more robust. And so I tend to see these mostly in two types of audits, but then one audit I know we do, and I don't know if other companies do it as well. So that's number 3. So something that we do that I'm sure other companies do, but I don't really see often is just a needle moving analysis. What are the needle moving activities? Don't tell us about our H2s and H3s that are in the wrong place and we're missing alt text, right? That's not most of the time the more needle moving big picture things that you can do to truly lift traffic. And so the type number 3 would be just tell me the big things, right? And that's great when you are having budget challenges. The fourth one would be a situational audit, and so we sometimes get pulled in for those. So when somebody, what they would really need is a really robust, deep audit for their site, but they don't have the budget, they'll say, okay, here are our questions. Can you just dive into these particular questions? And so we'll do analysis on those. And then the last one would be the full out big deep dive audit. And so what I'm going to talk about today is mostly the full deep dive audit. So what are the elements that should be included in that you need to consider? I think when people get an audit, that's what they expect. Unfortunately, their budget doesn't allow for that, and the people that they chose probably don't really have the experience or insight to help with those things. So just so we have some perspective on what I've tended to see these audits come in terms of price range, so you have some perspective, and you can help think about, do I have the right budget allocated? So level one would be the yada yada audit. This is as someone oftentimes just going into the SEO tools that people on this call probably know and have used, Moz, Webmaster Tools, and that type of thing, and just pulling out the reports and kind of summarizing it, and it's pretty much what you already know. I tend to find those falling in the $2,500 to $5,000 range. That's typically when somebody says that's what they got. I'll ask, well, what did you pay? And it usually falls within that price bracket. You got to remember that it takes a lot of time to go out and gather some of the data. What you really need is the analysis of that data. So I'm not a big fan of these yada yadas, and neither is anyone who's received them. The second one is the best practices audit, and those tend to be just slightly more in depth, but they're not definitely something typically for a big enterprise level organization. I know I'm looking at some of the people who are on this audit, and I know quite a few of you, and you are bigger brands, bigger complicated websites. The kind of best practices audit is probably something you are beyond, and that's not something you're interested in. And so you want to watch that what you're really not getting is somebody who's just kind of looking at general best practices and how are they applied on your site. So those audits tend to fall, I think, somewhere in like the 3,500, maybe sometimes even 2,500 to 8,000. So if that's kind of your price point, don't be surprised if you get this. Now you may say, oh, I've got this guy, or I found this company that does the deeper audits in that price point, and good for you, you found the needle in the haystack. So, but this is typically what people kind of explain to me and what they paid. The next would be that broad stroke needle moving analysis, and I think those tend to fall in probably the $7,000 to $15,000 range. So that would be something that you would consider for those broad stroke needle moving analyses. And the price point, a lot of what drives that is the complexity of your website. Big, large enterprise level sites, those tend to have they're like unpeeling an onion, and every time you look at something, it's like, oh, I found something else, oh, I found something else, and so you're constantly adding to the to-do list of what you need to explore further. So that's why your audits tend to be more expensive, and why the big guys need the level 5 audit. But if you don't have, you need a little more than the needle moving analysis, or I'm sorry, more than just the needle movies. You have very specific things that you want to look at. Sometimes a client will have us do situation based. So as an example, we had a client who they had traffic that was really high, and then it would like drop for 3 months or 4 months, and then it would come back. And it was like this for 2 years, and they didn't know what to do with it. And so they brought us a list of, I want to say 10 to 15 questions that we analyzed, and that was one of them. So it was very pinpointed. It was also like they weren't an e-commerce store, but they were like an e-commerce platform in the sense that they had the faceted navigation on the left where you can do the selections in the catalog portion of the site. And then you had the listing pages, and they had a lot of stuff going on with there, and they didn't know how to structure the URLs and what should be indexed and not indexed, and how to handle the pagination and what was the best for their particular situations. And so we did a very situational audit for them, and I think all the analysis that they needed, it came in like the $13,000 to $15,000 range, right? So just some perspective on kind of what those price points are. Now the deep dive full audit, that's where you're really exploring all the things that are considered in the elements that we're going to talk about today. And I have seen those fall in the range of probably 15. That's a low end. Those are harder to find, but probably more in 20 to 25,000 through 50,000 or more, depending on your site and exactly what you want to hone in on or not hone in on. So that just gives you some perspective on price points I've seen with the people who have their audits. I'm not just taking it from my experience, from our clients. I'm taking it also from a lot of SEO managers. So if you are getting a yada yada audit, I want to make sure that you think about what are some of the questions you need to be asking and the expectations you should have for an audit so that you don't end up with that kind of audit next time, or in the audit that you're looking to purchase in the next few months. Okay, so what are some of the insights you should be expecting in your audit? So let's talk about 5 types of insights. Some of these you know, and almost every audit does that, but I do want to kind of talk about my thoughts on each of these. So the first is the most obvious: what's wrong, right? That's the no-brainer. But talk about what's wrong and why it's wrong. So that would be insight number 2. So it's not just say here's what you need to do, but also why this is what you need to do. I feel this is really important for larger companies with development teams. That way when you hand the report over to them, they understand the mistake they made so they don't make it again. So education is a big component of, in my opinion, what makes a good technical SEO audit. It's not just here's the laundry list of things you need to fix. It's here's what's right with your site, or here's what's, oftentimes what's right. Here's what's wrong with your site, and here's why it's wrong. And so you want to make sure that we're talking about all of those things. Also, data interpretation, right? So if they're grabbing data, so I'm a big fan of using sometimes Moz data, sometimes Webmaster Tool or Bing Webmaster Tools data, but don't just throw that data into the report and just say, oh, there are X duplicate title tags and Y short meta descriptions, and your load times aren't very high according to this particular chart, right? So we once had someone on our team deliver me a report like that. So I review all of our reports to make sure they're thorough and detailed and accurate and that type of thing. And I was like, what is this? And so we had to send it back to the back to the person who created that report. And I said, look, we don't deliver reports like this. Don't recap what's in the findings in your write-up in paragraph form. Instead, what you need to do is you actually need to analyze the data and interpret it. So I want your analysis, observations, or insights. What would you tell someone about this data? Not just a recap of what's in the screenshot. So it's not that it's wrong they're using these common tools. I find that a lot of people just don't know how to interpret the data in depth, and that's why they seem really weak. So the fact that they're using these common tools isn't the problem. It's that that a lot of people don't understand how to truly interpret the data at an advanced level. So I think data interpretation is a really big element that needs to be part of a good technical audit. And then obviously how to fix it. And in my opinion, how to fix it should basically be the instructions that you could practically copy and paste into a change request in your change request system that goes to IT. So it's literally just copy and paste these instructions over into your change request, and development should know how to fix it. So in my opinion, that's pretty much what should be in the audit for insight number 4. And then insight number 5, most audits do not identify, and they may not identify, even those that do, for every little thing, but maybe why it's happening. So for example, when I see header tags in the wrong place on a web page, I know why that's typically happening, and it's usually a few different reasons. One, the front-end developers have not been educated, or they're not doing what they were taught, to make sure that the CSS file accounts for fonts that are exact same style as maybe the H1 tag, so that when any developer goes in to create new headlines in the future, they don't get an H1 when they match the H1 font size, color, style, all of that. That's why a lot of times these things get introduced. The other is that they don't know where the header tags never should show up, and so they're applying them. And they should never be applying them in the first place, which comes, in my mind, down to a process issue. And the process issue is that someone isn't defining that during requirements documentation. So when you're doing wireframing. So when you're doing wireframing, that's when you should be defining your header tags, where they go and where they don't go. I think I've talked about this in a couple of other of the webinars that I've done. So why it's happening is almost as important as what's happening, so that you don't keep reintroducing the same problems repeatedly, because I see a lot of people introducing, a lot of companies, they'll get it fixed, but they don't fix the root cause. So wherever I see, just based on my years of experience of being in-house and working with in-house teams, I identify where it's happening where I can. Okay, you also want to consider, like when you talk to somebody about doing an audit, you want to consider how much detail do you need in the deliverable. So we kind of have a philosophy, documents have legs, and they need to be understood without a narrator. And so that's really important to me, because typically what happens is the SEO team gets an audit and then they forward it to other people. And so it needs to be something that other people can understand, because yes, you might do a walkthrough with your SEO partner, but it doesn't mean that they're going to have that walkthrough and that narration combined with the document moving forward. And so you might be an organization that says, oh, we don't need a lot of documentation, we just need kind of what to do, and we can take it from there. But a lot of, especially larger organizations, they actually value having the report that kind of spells everything out. So you need to know or have an idea of what you want before you even begin, so that you can actually get exactly what you need and pay for only what you need in that area. So the next thing is what we find is that sometimes, I kind of alluded to this, sometimes they just need kind of quick and dirty, right? So quick and dirty is what the budget and client needs. And so it's a little more of like, we've done things where, okay, you don't need the write-up, you just kind of need some direction. They'll say yes. And so we say, okay, here's what we're going to do to maximize the budget. We're really not going to give you much of a write-up. And what we'll do is we'll give you some notes and screenshots and stuff so you know what we're talking about. And then we will do a Q&A, and we'll walk through your questions with a webinar that you get, like GoToMeeting, and you'll record that, and then you'll have that to reference, and they'll say, yep, that works. So that's one way that you can get some of that detail at a lower price point. So you want to just think about all the things that you truly need in an audit, so that you can make sure you're talking to your partner and having the right expectations. Okay, so how do I know about these kinds of things and what teams need and that sort of stuff? And that's because I was an in-house SEO manager. I sat in your chair, I did what you're doing, I got the audits that I just kind of said we paid for that. And so it was really frustrating, and now I see a lot of SEO audits, right? So I consult and I look at a lot of SEO teams and how can we make them more efficient and effective. And then I also, because primarily with the in-house SEO exchange, which is an event for in-house SEO managers, a lot of managers talk to me very candidly about kind of what's going on and what they got, and they'll ask questions like, what should I have received, right? So I see a lot of what's going on. And so what I wanted to do is just really talk to you about what are some of the good elements of a technical SEO audit. So if you were kind of somewhat disengaged, this might be the point where you might want to turn over to start taking some notes, because I'm going to roll through quite a few things that I think would show up in a good technical audit, or things someone would do. All right, so I think the first component is, what do you already know? This is really important to me, and some of our clients actually say, don't remove that step when we're looking at scope changes. And because it's really important that who you're working with know what you already know, so they elevate it, so that they make sure that they're telling you stuff that you're not already aware of. And I think a lot of SEO audits, that's the problem, is that they tend to talk about the same stuff you already know. Now, that's not to say it may not show up in your audit. So oftentimes what we'll do is, if it's something that we feel is an issue, we'll still bring it up. Other times it's an issue that they know about, but they're having trouble pushing it through. So we'll make sure that we talk about why it's important, and we think about that as we're writing that up. So having that conversation around what you already know is very crucial. Another thing would be the SERPs evaluation. So actually studying what's going on in the search results. And I know a lot of people who do audits that don't really think about actually studying the search results. But that's actually the first place I go when I'm doing an SEO audit. I don't start on the website. I don't start with a crawler. I start with the search results, and I study. Probably I go through pages 1 through 100 at a minimum. Just really looking at how are things getting indexed, what looks duplicative, how are URLs showing up, how are title tags showing up, what do the snippets look like. All of those kinds of things are what I'm looking for as I do the SERPs evaluation. I want to understand how are things being indexed. So that would be the next thing that I'm really looking at. Okay, then Google Webmaster Tools analysis, and that's what's key. This isn't merely just pulling out screenshots, it's educating you on the findings of the data and what it means, potential implications. So for example, if you have 560 duplicate title tags, they should not just say, oh, you have 560 duplicate title tags. Instead, what they should be doing, and this is what we would do, we download that data and try and look for what's causing it. And so we'll look and see, okay, what are some of the potential reasons for that? Because it's not always easy to spot on the website, and there's some bizarre reasons we found causing those types of things. So you want somebody who's actually going to look below the surface of the data that's there and actually analyze it to try and come up with, okay, these are the action items from that. And then I think also Bing Webmaster Tools analysis is important. And for some strange reason, Bing is like the ugly redheaded stepchild of SEO. It's quite sad, really, because the tool is really good. In fact, I was talking to someone at a very, very big brand, an in-house SEO manager, and he said the same thing. Like, there's a lot of interesting data. And so we were at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and he asked how many people, he was actually speaking, and he asked how many people are using Bing, and like 3 people in the room raised their hand. And so I think Bing is really important, that you might want to consider using it. So that's really important for your audit. Okay, next is the crawl and crawl interpretation. And this is especially important if you have a large enterprise level site. So you want to make sure somebody's crawling your website to really study how the crawler is interpreting the data, what they would be finding. It also helps us uncover things like URL issues, duplicate content issues you may not be aware of. So you really understand what kind of crawl, whether or not they're doing crawling and what kind of data analysis they're doing with that crawl interpretation. And so really for us, it's about studying that crawl and crawl interpretation data. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. And you also want to understand, well, what are they going to be crawling? You know, if you're just using Screaming Frog, I'm not saying it's an awful tool. It's actually a very good tool. But they need to know how to use it for an enterprise level site if you are indeed an enterprise level website. Because I think it tops out, I don't remember what the number is, but it tops out far lower than what an enterprise level site's number of pages are. So in my mind, a good technical SEO audit would crawl the site. Is it going to crawl everything? Probably not. Especially those of you who have, 10, 20, or 20 million pages or more. There's no way this kind of tool would be able to do that. And most SEO companies and providers won't be able to do that. There are big tools that allow you to do that. For example, I was talking to SEO Clarity recently, and they were telling me that, yeah, one of their clients actually engaged them to crawl 26 million pages, and they were having an issue where the wrong type of content was showing up on the page. To be honest, it was a little bigger than SEO, but it was caused their SEO issue. So I think the SEO team put them on it. And so they crawled all of these pages to try and understand what some of the issues were and how it would affect SEO. And so again, a lot of SEO providers aren't going to be able to provide that kind of data, but your big tools might be. So you might want to look at those enterprise level tools that you have, and maybe they could provide some of that data to your provider, your SEO person doing your audit, and that might help bring down some of the costs for you. Okay, the next is an actual code check, right? So a lot of people don't understand what this really means. It's truly popping up the source code and looking at it for SEO issues. This is not running tools on it, although it could be, because there are things that I would definitely run tools on. There are just certain things you want to look at in the code and that you could only see by studying the code. So you want to make sure that somebody's actually doing a code check and really clearly understanding what do I do, or I'm sorry, what's wrong with this particular code set or base for any given page. So that's really important. I don't tend to see that in a lot of audits. So you want to make sure you understand what's kind of involved in that. The next would be templates. And so I think a lot of SEOs, to my surprise, don't really understand the concepts or templates, or it's just not top of mind when they think about the site. So when you're doing a technical SEO audit, and you don't want to bring this up, because to me it's a red flag as to whether or not they understand how your site might be structured. But they should talk about and ask you, well, how many templates do you have? Which ones do you want to be evaluated? Can you show us the ones that are kind of, I call it worst case scenario, meaning everything is turned on, or as many things as possible are turned on? Because what happens is, and a lot of websites, especially, again, these are for bigger sites, you'll have one template, but it could generate, I've seen upwards of 30 or 40 different types of page unique renderings between all the modules that go on and off, right? A developer would tell us, oh yeah, that could generate about 40 different pages, unique pages. And so sometimes they'll actually give us a special page to look at for a code check with all of those modules turned on. So we are truly indeed looking at the worst case scenario. And so that's what you want to look at. And so you have to go in and figure out, what are the templates that we actually want somebody to look at? They don't need to look at 20 product pages if the templates are exactly the same. They just need to look at that template page, which you probably know, but surprisingly a lot of SEOs, that they're not thinking quite at that level. So I want to make sure that, especially those of you who are on a lower price point budget, that this is one of your indicators of whether they understand your site and how it's structured, and they'd be a good fit for you. So I would consider that a weed out question for you. Okay, the next one would be page load time analysis. With this being really big, I think that this is kind of the no-brainer, absolutely must be in it. But you want to make sure that they're going to get deeper than just the running in the Google Page Speed Insights and YSlow. Those are the two most common tools. They're kind of the easy does it tools, because they kind of spoon feed all the changes and that type of thing. And instead you want to hope that they, you don't want to hope, you want to kind of check out, well, what tools might you be using for that? And they might be a little hesitant on some of these questions in their defense, right? Because everybody has their own process and how they're doing it. So you may not get all the answers, but you want to make sure that you understand that they're going above and beyond page speed and YSlow for this analysis, and they should be looking, at a variety of issues. I think I've done an entire webinar on page speed, so so those of you who are in that saw that. But they should be looking at things like render blocking JavaScript and CSS. Looking not at just the home page, but by template. So this is what a lot of people may not realize, the complexity of page speed analysis is you have to do it template by template. So it really takes a lot of time to do. So you want to make sure that you understand which templates you want that to be done on. You want to look at sorry, I have a few things here in lists. The number of requests being made, and so we talked about that in the page load speed webinar a few weeks ago. And so those would be for JavaScript, CSS, images, and then total on the page. You want to look at the weight for major pages and that type of thing. So like I said, we went over this quite a bit, and I believe a lot of you were on that webinar. That webinar is not available, but we're thinking about making it available for purchase to watch the replay. So if that's something of interest to you, let me know. So anyway, I think that this is something really important. If you are over, I think, probably 3 or 4 seconds, this needs to be a decent chunk of your audit. A decent chunk meaning not necessarily 50%, but a good analysis being done. Okay. The next would be the canonical tag. I think this is really obvious, but there are just some nuances, and so you want to make sure that this is definitely something that's going to be evaluated. I remember we did this one site, and it wasn't an early on observation that we had, but what was happening is the developers were canonicalizing the page for various reasons to a URL that wasn't linked to anywhere in the site itself. Okay, and that's a very weird situation, and you wouldn't necessarily know that unless you truly study the canonical tags and what's going on. So you want to make sure that you're really looking at those elements. You also want to look at maybe where things shouldn't go, and that would be important. So For example, I talked about their tags. They should never go in the left or right rail, the header and footer, or your drop-down navigation in your menus. Mega menus, I think, is what they're often called. So it should explain that, hey, look, these things should never go in these areas, not just that you should remove them, right? And so that's pretty important. It should also talk about things that are maybe unused JavaScript files and CSS. And we talked about this again in the page load types webinar, where I said a lot of times you have JavaScript and CSS files that are kind of site-wide rather than being specific to each page, and it doesn't really go to this particular page. So they should be talking about these kinds of things with you. Again, that's going to educate you and what your developers need to start doing differently moving forward. So the next thing would be evaluating the head content, or really maybe elements are more important. It's surprising how many times we see incorrect information in the head content, where title tags maybe aren't showing up in there, meta descriptions aren't showing up in there. We've got doc type issues going on there. So that's pretty important, and things that you want to make sure are showing up in the head content. Again, making it just really easy for a search engine to find everything. I am all about do not make the search engines process anything, and that's really important to me. So we've talked about that again in some other webinars that we've done. Okay, the next one would be the more obvious URL evaluation. And so it's obvious, like the header tags, we're using dashes instead of underscores, our directory is not very deep, right? Those are the more obvious things. But you should also be, if you have any unusual file extensions that you're using, it's interesting, there are actually a few file extensions that we've seen that cause a page to not get indexed. And when you just change that file extension, suddenly the pages will start getting indexed. And so that's important for you to know. Also, your parameter usage. Parameters are not good for SEO, but they are oftentimes not a sky is falling issue. It's not the end of the world if you can do them elegantly. And so they should be talking to you about how to elegantly do parameters, not just say, oh, you need to take out parameters. Because the truth is a lot of sites can't do that, especially these larger enterprise level websites. So you've got to find out, what are the alternatives. And so you need to make sure that your SEO provider can actually work within the limitations of your world. And that's really crucial because a lot of you guys work in an enterprise level organization with a lot of technical limitations. Okay, so the next one would be status code evaluation. And so what are status codes? Status codes are the thing when you as a browser, your computer goes to call a website, it returns a status code that says, yep, the page is here, that's a 200 status code, or nope, the page has permanently moved, that's a 301 status code, or what we call a 301 redirect, basically the same thing. Then you have a 302 status code, right? That's a temporary redirect, which we know is not usually good for SEO. There are a few scenarios where it would be. And then you also have a 404 status code, right? There are a lot more status codes, but you want to make sure that you actually have a status code evaluation, somebody that can actually take a look at what's going on with our status codes and are they accurate. A common mistake that we see are 404s 404 pages that don't return a 404 status code. And so a lot of times, especially in enterprise level sites, you'll have a multiple 404 pages, but the SEO team may not even know about it. So we were working on a major site that had this particular scenario. And so what was going on is, as we were working on my site migration actually, and we were kind of looking at different directories within the site, and the different directories, some of them were sitting on different servers, and they had their own 404 errors, and they had different 404 pages, and the SEO person said, I've never seen that page before. And it turned out they were actually delivering a 200 status code rather than the 404 status code, right? So you want to make sure that you get all these things cleaned up, so you have a really clean architecture and you're conveying all the right things to search engines. Okay, so again, you want to make sure that you have some type of status code evaluation. The next would be faceted navigation evaluation. So faceted navigation is where we see you think about the e-commerce site, you go to Zap.com or even Amazon.com, and on the left, they have the ability for you to search for color and price and brand and size and all of that. That's what I call faceted navigation. It has many, many different names. But what you want to look at, somebody should be looking for is, okay, how is this creating duplicate content? Are there scenarios where the content is too thin and maybe you should be no indexing some of this content, some of these pages? Do you want all the pages even to be indexed? Are you using Ajax? How is that being viewed by search engines or not being viewed by search engines? Do you have title tag duping going on? How are you handling the rel equals next and prev? How are you handling the view all link? So all of those things need to be considered. And so those are just a few of the things I would expect to come up if you are kind of an e-commerce site. Again, this adds another layer of complexity to your audit if you actually have these types of things. So the next element that you might want to think about is a mobile evaluation. So we know now mobile is huge. Obviously, it's growing in popularity. Search engines say if you don't have a strong mobile experience, that it could actually hurt your desktop rankings as well as your mobile. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at this, but you need to ask for it. So I don't think companies are thinking when you say, I need a technical SEO audit, they're looping in the mobile audit automatically. And part of that is because it's no small undertaking. Doing a mobile audit is probably going to add, and I'm guessing here, 20 to 80% of work depending on your implementation. And so you need to make sure that you realize, hey, this is in some cases like doing 2 audits. And that's if your tablet and mobile are the same code base. But some companies actually find, hey, we have a better user experience if we have a tablet version, a desktop version, and a mobile phone version of the site. And those are potentially 3 different code bases. That's 3 code sets that need to be audited. And so they're often done by different development teams and that sort of thing. So when that happens, we need to make sure that we're actually thinking about, okay, we need to multiply. It's an exponential amount of work. So be thinking about that as you're budgeting and you're thinking, oh, I just want an audit and it's going to cost X dollars. If you want to loop in mobile, you want to make sure that you up that accordingly. And so when you say, oh, I want a mobile audit, they should be asking, how is your mobile implementation? Right, so you can have where you're using the same content, with responsive, or where you're serving up different set of code, or you could have an MDOT site. So you want to make sure that they're asking you about that. Okay, SEO tools are awesome. And I love SEO tools, and they are useful, but I find that my eyes and my memory are the most important tools in my toolbox because tools miss data. And so they should be talking about, hey, you know what? We manually review everything. It's not just about what comes out of the tools. And I've talked to some really hardcore SEOs that I know who do consulting, and I remember one of them I asked, what tools do you use? She's like, she kind of laughed. She's like, I don't use a lot of tools. And because I was doing a presentation on tools and I had the same feeling, like I use tools, but for the most part, I only use a handful of tools, my trusty tool set, and then beyond that, it's mostly a human evaluation of what are some of the issues. And so you want to make sure that they have the competency to go beyond just the tools and that they kind of talk about, hey, look, we're actually doing a human review, not just focusing on the output of SEO tools. And then the next thing would be a XML sitemap evaluation. And so you want to make sure that somebody's actually taking a look at your sitemap and saying, okay, what's going on with our sitemap? Because this is really important because Bing has said, and I believe I'm quoting it correctly, I might have it wrong. I think they said that if your sitemap has 3% of errors, 3% of the URLs in the sitemap have errors, they will ignore it altogether. This means there's a very low threshold for allowable errors. And so there's a very good chance that a lot of you have sitemaps that are being completely ignored by Bing. And so some companies truly need a crawl management strategy where they're actually managing the crawl bots. And so we had the in-house SEO exchange last week, and I asked how many people actually had that, and I think only one, maybe two companies raised their hand as having a strategy, but there were plenty of companies that were large enough to actually benefit from such a thing. So I want to make sure that you think about that the sitemap evaluation is part of that, but you might also want to talk to them about a crawl management strategy. Okay, mobile, that's a duplicate. They should also be talking about your priorities. So what are the priorities? So when you look at all the action items, what's kind of like high, medium, low, and the showstoppers? These absolutely need to get fixed. So that's going to be really important for you. And you want to check on that, because not everybody actually defines those types of things for you so that you truly understand, okay, what is must fix versus nice to fix. And so I see a lot of people kind of pursuing the low-hanging fruit, which low-hanging fruit in the audit are the easy fixes, which are not necessarily the needle-moving fixes. And so you want to make sure that you're focusing on the needle-moving fixes. And then the last would be a roadmap. So the smaller audits, that I talked about up early on in the webinar, those do not often have a roadmap because you got to sit down and you really think about it. But if you have the budget to get a roadmap, you want to make sure that someone actually says, look, if I were to take a look at all of these things, here's how I would structure the execution of them. These would be done first, these would be done second, these would be done third. Most likely you'll get like a light roadmap, and all of ours kind of say, okay, these are the ones we want you to do first. So at a minimum, you should have something like that. So with that, I want to just kind of pop before I go on to see, was this useful for you? Do you have any questions? What are your questions about audits at this point? I see one question has come in. What is a 404 versus a soft 404? That's a great question. So a 404 status code is when your website returns a true 404, right? It says this is a 404 status code, the page no longer exists. A soft 404 is when it looks like it should maybe have a 404. It's a page that the search engines, and you probably are seeing this in the Google Webmaster Tools, and so the search engines are saying, hey, look, this seems to me like it's a page not found. You'll get that when maybe you have a page that generates, maybe you have a catalog, and for whatever reason you're an e-commerce store and your category has no inventory and no products in that particular search criteria. And so it'll say, we're sorry, but there's nothing available to match your search. And so that would be a soft 404 register, because the search engines will say, you know what? This seems to me like nothing exists. It's kind of like a page not found type of page. So we tend to see those kinds of things show up in a soft 404. So Brian, hopefully that addresses your question. So Chris has a question. We are planning a redesign. Should we do an audit before or after? And that is a really good question, and I think it depends on budget. What's nice about doing an audit is it tells you what to keep and carry over and what to get rid of and fix, and so that your developers don't make the same mistakes, because there's a very high chance that they're going to reintroduce the same issues that they have in the current site. And some of the issues are architecture issues. So they actually fall in the architecture layer rather than in kind of the code layer where it's easy. And so when you're doing a redesign, sometimes the architecture layer is going to get a bit of a facelift or be completely rebuilt. And so that's the perfect opportunity to start injecting SEO changes there and requirements. So I think it depends on your budget. If budget allows, I would do an SEO audit with the mindset, and so they know going in, hey, don't tell us about the things that are going to go away. What we need an audit for is to help us understand how to make our new site better. That's what you need. And so I think that when you go in with that mindset, you go in with a very different approach to the feedback and write-up. And so that's what I would recommend for you, Chris. Okay, John. How do you deal with IBM port? Oh, John, you emailed me on this one. This is a big question. So John's question is, how do you deal with IBM Portal and URLs? Portal generates dynamic URLs that are not SEO friendly. And so, John, I don't have the exact answer for you. I actually talked to someone on my team. I forgot to get back to you. And what we had said was we work with developers on that, and we kind of talk about what's needed, and they usually know what to do, but we don't have the exact answer for the IBM Portal specific, go change this and tweak this and do this. So I don't have an answer for you on that yet. Okay, Moses, hi. Nice to see you. Brian Mathers, great, thanks. Um, uh, Lee, you asked, sorry I missed the first half of the webinar, but did Jessica cover rel equals alternate tags? No, what I did say is, and I think that you're referring to mobile, I did say that you need to have someone look at your mobile site in terms of your audit, and just remember that that's almost like doing another site review. It's not necessarily double the work, but sometimes it could be upwards of 80% depending on how your sites are structured, your mobile pages. Let's see, Valerie, for the crawl analysis, would the log file from a company's dev team be a good resource? And I think it can be if your SEO provider has somebody who knows how to query log files. So that could be part of it, but I would not use that unto itself. And what that tells us is what Google is actually calling on your site, but it doesn't actually, I think I would actually be crawling the site because I would be gathering additional data beyond just URLs being fetched. So your crawl files, your crawl analysis files are really useful to tell us this is what Googlebot is actually doing on your site. But what an actual crawl does is it will gather more than just the URLs that are being indexed. It'll grab title tags, meta descriptions, it can grab header tags, it can grab your canonical tag, it can grab so many different things depending on what you set your crawler up to do. And so it can grab all that data so that you can start analyzing large spans of data from your crawl itself. So hopefully that helps you, Valerie. Let's see, Brian asked, what are the top 3 things you would look at in analytics? Yeah, so I didn't put that in there. That probably should have been in the list. What are some of the things I might look at in analytics? So I would say I'd be looking at your incoming traffic by search engine. I'd look overall SEO and then by search engine, and I'm looking for trending. Where did things go up? Where did things go down? I'm looking for spikes. Spikes or dips that might be correlating with releases that you made, especially if we're in a troubleshooting situation. That's what I would be looking for. You also would be looking at the number of pages that are maybe driving traffic and what is the trend for that over time, because I want to see that going up, not going down. So I would say those are 2. What would be number 3? Sorry, Brian, this isn't an analytics call, so I wasn't quite prepped for that one. Number 3. Traffic, so your pages, it used to be keywords, but your keyword data isn't coming through anymore. So I kind of poke around and see what's going from there. Oh, I know what it would be. It would be probably 3 would be 3 and 4 would be the number of pages viewed by your SEO traffic and the time on site by your SEO traffic. The reason for that is I'm very mindful of user experience. So, and that's not really a technical audit, by the way, Brian, that probably won't show up in your technical audit, but more of a user experience, SEO user experience evaluation would probably have something like that. But I am concerned about, how much time are people spending on my site who come from search engines before they hit the back button? Because search engines care about that. How many pages are they viewing? Because search engines care about that. And I might also be looking at when they come in on, some of my top pages or top templates, how many pages are they viewing? Because that might help you drive decisions on the different templates and how you might do those differently and improve from a conversion rate analysis. And it's not just conversion from a standpoint of the sale, but also a conversion of I need them to spend more time on the site so that the search engines perceive us as being a good search result for this particular keyword. So those are some things that I might look at in analytics. Brian says, brilliant, nonetheless, great answer. All right, wonderful. Okay, so at this point, a lot of you probably said, fantastic, I have everything I need to move forward and get a great SEO audit and talk to people more intelligently as you do your shopping. So be a more informed SEO audit shopper. But some of you may say, hey, this is really interesting. I have an audit coming up. I'd like to talk to you, Jessica, about what you do. So if you're interested in talking to us about some of our audits and what we could do for you guys, just type yes in your questions box. If you don't type yes, I'm not offended. I hope this was extremely valuable for you. So that's something that we can talk about. So that's that. And then I also wanted to talk to you about something that I've had that I created a while back and I haven't really done anything with, and I feel like, oh, the question came out at the event last week on, hey, we hired somebody and they didn't do what we expected. I thought, let me resurrect this piece. So I did this course in January. I had some small business friends who were getting burned by SEO providers, and I was speaking to a group of small freelance SEOs, small businesses, and small SEO agencies. And I said, okay, let me create what is needed to up-level how these guys are doing SEO, because I think a lot of them tend to be operating under small business old-fashioned SEO practices, just because they don't have time to stay up on what's new, and they may not know where to stay on top of that. So I created this course, which is basically SEO consulting in a box. And so I thought, well, let me just pull that back out and let's see if people are interested in this. And so those of you who are at really big brands, I know you guys, and I know a couple of you have purchased some of the things accidentally that were for small businesses and it wasn't the right fit for you. So this is probably not the right fit for you in an enterprise level environment. But for those of you who are in smaller businesses, or if you're an enterprise level but you're still new, you might actually get some benefit out of this. If you're new to SEO. Basically what this is I created, if I had a small business, what would I need my team to know? If I wanted to scale how I did audits for small businesses, how would I do that? And so I said, well, they need to know how to do an audit. They need to know the best practices. They need click-by-click instructions, and they need an example of someone walking through, how do I do a technical audit? How do I do keyword research? How do I evaluate social media for SEO? How do I do SEO user experience for SEO? Those of you who remember the F2R framework, which I had kind of given you a sneak preview of a few webinars back, there were the 6 pillars of SEO that were the strategies. It hits all 6 pillars of the SEO strategies. There are 10 pillars of SEO. It hit the 6 pillars plus a little bit of the metrics piece. And so literally it gives you basically all the things you need, including templates for your deliverables. So you get a technical SEO audit template, and oh, by the way, you get an example completed technical SEO audit. And so it's really quite useful for somebody who is saying, look, I have my own way, but maybe it's not consistent, or if only I could train someone else to do this stuff on my team, then it would free me up. This is the perfect type of thing for that. So again, I offered this to this group I spoke to, and it's just kind of been sitting there, and I thought, well, let me dust it off. It hasn't been that long ago. It was just in, I think, January. We did this it was an online course. We did it January through April. So it's still really fresh. If you're interested in that, type the word box and we'll get you in for information on that. Again, like if I were somewhat new, or I had newer people on my team and I was an enterprise level person, I might be interested in this, but just know that the perspective is from small business. I just don't want you to be disappointed. It's really valuable, and somebody who took the course said, hey, I thought I knew SEO until I took this course, and she had been in it, I want to say longer than me, because she had told me what company she was with, and I had considered hiring them, and she was there around that time. So I thought that was a really interesting observation from somebody. So it's really detailed. Okay, so with that, if you have any additional questions, I will hang out, but I think related to your audits, it looks to me like right now the questions have ceased on the audit. So with that, I will let you go. Have a wonderful afternoon. Those of you who typed yes will be in touch to set up a call with you, and those who typed box will be in touch to talk about what that entails. There's no internet marketer am I, having this course that doesn't actually have a website yet. But I just thought I've got it. Let me pull it out. It's and see what happens and who's interested in that. So it looks like quite a few of you are interested. That's awesome. If you decide later that you're interested, feel free to just drop us a note. I think that's it. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for joining me on Monday. And I am traveling this week, but I might do another webinar next week. I've got a couple things that are up my sleeve. So stay tuned, and hopefully you'll hear from me in a couple days. Bye.